Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Douglas School Committee on October 16th at 6:30 p.m. The Douglas Public Schools offers diverse learning experience that meet the academic, social, physical, and emotional needs of all of our students. We provide a safe, supportive, and challenge learning environment in which students may achieve academic success and personal growth. Decisions are made in the best interest of our students. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. I'd like to call our student representatives up. Parker Matthew, Dante Montello Tavallo, and Marcus Lazou. So sorry.
Hi, my name is Parker Matthews and I am here with Dante and Marcus. We are student council members at the middle school. There are a lot of exciting things happening around the middle school. In sports, the JV volleyball, JV girls soccer, and JV boys soccer seasons are all coming to an end. The JV boys just tied Misco Hill, and the JV girls had a great season and won most of their games. The JV girls volleyball team had an amazing season, and they have their last game this Friday. Cross country had their only home meet today. The boys lost a close race, and the girls team won. Each runner has improved as the season has progressed.
The Student Council is planning a School Spirit Week for the last week of October and a can drive for the first 2 weeks of November to help benefit people in the community through St. Denis Church. There will be a middle school dance hosted by the Music Boosters next Friday at the high school. Progress reports were posted 2 weeks ago so parents could be informed on how their child's grades are.
In the 8th grade wing, the students are learning about the moon phases, space and tides, and they are starting a lab on different types of water and science. In Intro to Algebra, they are learning about transformations on a graph, and in Honors Algebra, they are learning about scientific notations. In Civics, the students are doing an Enlightenment Thinker coin brochure. And in ELA, we are learning about parts of speech and working on tag, summary, and 2 main ideas. And in Spanish, we are talking about our storyboard and focusing on writing sentences in Spanish. The 8th graders also had their elections for class officers, and the results were announced today. Jack Oskerko, Maddie Hogan, Brooke Keeney, Brody Guthenberg, Abigail Evers, and Jacob Rodson will be leading our class, working with Miss Huff and Miss Flynn as their advisors. They are looking forward to working cooperatively and planning the end of the year events.
The 7th graders are learning about kinetic and potential energy in science and the rules of rotational numbers and adding and subtracting integers in pre-algebra. In world history, they are learning about ancient India, and they are writing personal narratives in ELA.
Downstairs, the 6th graders are learning about the continental drift and Alfred Wegener in science and the distributive property in math. In world history, they are learning about social sciences, and in ELA, they are working on letters to themselves and will be reading them at the end of the year. This ties into the goals for next year. They are also learning about digital literacy.
The related arts classes are all going well as a group of students are working with our new STEM teacher, Mrs. Murphy. We are looking forward to community meetings this week. The students are all in the groove of school and are figuring out the schedule, Power School, and the expectations of all our teachers.
Thank you for having us and have a good night.
Very good. Dante, did you say there's a school dance coming up?
Yeah.
Do you know what the date is?
October 25th,
Did you say it's at the high school or is it at the middle school?
high school.
At the high school. Very exciting. Okay, great.
Is that so for more kids to come?
Correct.
Sweet.
Yeah. Very nice.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, and public speaking is not easy. But you guys did a great job.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for coming in.
It was so much fun, they didn't want to leave.
Moving over to public comment. Is anyone here for public comment? Please state your name and your address, please.
Monique Salvis, 3 Sandra Circle. Good evening, members of the school committee, administrators, staff, and families in attendance. I come before the school board tonight to express my grave concerns as a parent of children attending Douglas Public Schools. I have reviewed MCAS data for this district, and our most recent scores look abysmal. There is no sugarcoating it. Here, I have data for 2 grade cohorts, last year's 5th grade and last year's 7th grade. It shows that in both cohorts, the amount of students went from being above the state average in meeting or exceeding expectations to being below the state average in this most recent data. The number of students exceeding expectations dropped in both cohorts. The number of students meeting expectations for grade level dropped significantly. As of our 2024 scores, approximately 75% of last year's 5th graders were not meeting full grade level expectations in both ELA and math. Approximately 60% of last year's 7th graders were not meeting full grade level expectations in ELA or math. Clearly, all of our students, highest, middle, and lowest achieving students, lost ground. Having more than one grade cohort here shows this disappointing picture is occurring across the district. As a parent, I am gravely concerned about the lack of rigor in this district and the misrepresentations this district makes about what it offers our students in these meetings and in a marketing video that speaks to the so-called rigorous instruction Douglas offers. I am extremely frustrated with the apparent complacency and lack of urgency on the part of our administration to focus, dive deep, and fix our district's shortcomings that are affecting our students' achievement. I have witnessed where critical standards aren't even being met, and in the spring brought my concerns to the administration. I still do not have any follow-up as to what is being done to rectify this. This district has spent the last few years working to increase staff and administration wages, while our students have lost ground in academic achievement. I would love for someone to try to defend that to me, because actually it's shameful. You are going to be presented with this data, and it is possible that an effort will be made to turn focus to what we are doing well. But in reality, this ugly picture needs to be seriously addressed now. Ladies of the school committee, many of you with your own children in this district, when you hear this data reported to you, I implore you, please, ask tough questions about what you hear. Hold this district accountable and demand that appropriate actions be taken to improve the dreadful picture we see before us. Demand to see an ongoing progress of remediation plans you hear this evening. Set all our students on the path to high achievement. This district answers to you, and our students are counting on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing that there is none, moving on to any old business.
We do not have any old business.
Moving on to new business and the superintendent's report, please.
Right, we're going to start off with our MCAS presentation and analysis from our data from last year. And as I've said multiple times, this is one data point in a whole slew of data points that we look at for our students and for our staff. There's a lot of things to celebrate in this presentation. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done as well, too. But I just want to emphasize that, you know, when you're looking at what happens in a district, you have the SEL piece, you have the AP scores. You have what's happening with the relationship between students and staff. You have kids turning it around with attendance. The MCAS is just one data point and multiple data points that we look at to measure success for kids. And I've said that for 5 years, and I continue to believe it. So we'll dive a little bit into the data. If my clicker works. It's not working. Is it on is the next question. Yep, it says on. There we go. All right, we're going to start off with state trends. And this came from a presentation that was done by the Department of Education the end of September. ELA results show lower achievement in all grades from 23 to 24. So if you look at how kids did in ELA across all grade levels, they did worse in 2024 than they did in 2023. If you look at math results, with the exception of grade 3, most grade levels across the Commonwealth were relatively flat from 23 to 24. And science results show improved achievement in grades 5, 10, with lower in 8. So those were some state trends that we saw. So one thing that was alarming across the state, we've had the conversations, is from 23 to 24 across the Commonwealth, there was basically a decline in MCAS scores. Next is a slide around chronic absenteeism. We've been focusing in on kids being absent from school, and these numbers are staggering. And if you look at it, the top's ELA, the bottom is math. So in grades 3 to 8, the difference in average scaled score between students who were chronically absent and weren't chronically absent is 14 points, and in grade 10, it's 18 points. And the difference in students meeting or exceeding expectations in grades 3 to 8, chronically absent to not chronically absent, is 20%, where in grade 10, it's 27%. And you see the same trend, even at a higher number, happening in math, which is why we've seen the big push across the state and in the district to reach out to families when kids aren't coming to school. We see the numbers right there. Kids aren't in school, they're struggling to succeed, and the MCAS data points to that. The district overview telling our story, I'm going to talk about it from a different district lens, and I will turn it over to the principals. We focused in on, as I said last week, an emphasis on data analysis, using MTSS, using universal design for learning, adapting instruction based on feedback from benchmark assessments, writing ISSPs, and prioritizing the social emotional well-being of our students. Stacks, this next chart's a little tricky to look at. It's in color in the back, but I'll try to walk people through it. So the first column says across the state, that's the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations on the MCAS. So you have 3 to 8, then you have 3 to 8 combined, and you have grade 10. Then you can see how that compares to the 23 school year. As you can see across the state, there was a decline. So for instance, 42% in 24, it was 40% in 23. So across the Commonwealth, there was a decline in MCAS scores, the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations. Then you can compare that to pre-pandemic numbers in 2019. The gaps are still pretty massive from where we were pre-pandemic. If you look at Douglas in the 24 school year, we were tied with the state average in grade 3, above the state average in grade 6, and above the state average in grade 10. But you can see where we buck the state trends is in grades 3, 5, and 7, where we actually did better in 24 than we did in 23. And in grade 10, it was flat. We were 62%. The numbers are still massive from where we were in the 2019 school year. In mathematics, again, you can see the state average. In grade 3, it was up 3 points from the 23 to 24 school year. In grade 4, it was up 1 point. In grades 8 and 3 to 8 combined, it was flat. Again, you can see massive pre-pandemic gaps still exist from where we are now to where we were in 2019. In terms of being above the state average in MCAS scores, we were above the state average in grades, in grades 6, 7, and 8, and tied with the state average in grade 10. You can see where we go above the trend that we saw in the state of students doing better in 24 than they did in 23 in grades 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and tied, no change in grades 10. And we actually were above pre-pandemic numbers in grades 7 and 8. So, and then we'll do science as one more, sorry. Science, they said we saw increases in grades 5 and 10 across the state, and again, we saw increases in grades 5, 8, and in grades 5 and 8 combined, but we dropped a percentage point in grade 10. So what do you glean? What do you glean from this? You know, data was better than the state average in ELA. For 3 grades, we had higher achievement. 5 grades were better than the state, where the state only had 1. Our district data mirrored the state in achievement in science. Our pre-COVID gaps still exist, and the initiatives and interventions we've put in place have had a positive impact. Do we still have a ways to go? Absolutely. I handed out a chart of where we rank percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations and growth scores relative to the Valley. And just quickly, just for point of reference, in grades 3 to 8, the average MCAS percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations was 36.3. In Douglas, it was 37. The student growth percentage for students meeting or exceeding, for SGP for 3 to 8 in ELA was 48.3. We were at 47. In grade 10, the average students meeting or exceeding expectation in ELA was 59.4. We were 61. For our student growth percentage was 54.5. We were at 61. Meeting exceeding expectations, the Valley average was 41.1. We were 39. Our student growth percentage for 3 to 8, the average in the Valley was 49.4. We were at 54%. For meeting exceeding expectations, the Valley average was 50.8. We were at 48. And for student growth percentage for math in grade 10, the average in the Valley was 53.7. We were at 46. And then over on the back, we have science and technology. They don't have SGP, but the average in the Valley for 3 to 8 was 43.5. We were at 42. And for grade 10 or 9, depending on when they take it, it was 49.5, and we were 58. Should those numbers be higher? Absolutely, they should be higher. I'd love to be number 1 in the Valley across all of those touch points. We're right in the middle. So is there work to be done? Absolutely, there is. Do I wish that we had more than 37% of our kids, or 39% meeting, exceeding expectations in grades 3 to 8 collectively? Absolutely. Is there work to do? 100%. But just a little relative, as we're looking at numbers throughout the night, I just wanted the committee to have a frame of reference of where we fell. Before I turn it over, we're going to go in order of buildings, elementary, middle, and high school. Any questions on the statewide trends?
I wrote down a lot, but it's going to take me a minute. Does somebody else want to go?
I would just like to know what Hopedale and Sutton are doing when I look at the, our
Yeah.
kind
I
of
mean-
comparables, because their scores are looking really good.
Yeah, Hopedale was at, I believe, at 80% in 3 to 8, and they were up to 80%. It was Hopedale, Sutton, and Grafton.
Grafton.
Yep.
It was the third district that was way up there.
Do we know what are they doing differently?
They have
I guess one of the
interventions.
questions I wrote down, I personally would prefer us to really compare, I want to say to a state average. Can you tell me why for our scores we're looking specifically at the Valley? Like, what do I care what their averages are in Bellingham if we're below this? Do you know what I mean? To me,
Yeah.
it seems better to compare to the whole state. I like these numbers.
Again, schools use 100 different metrics. They use state metrics. Department of Education does something called DART schools. They give you 10 like schools across the Commonwealth that they compare you to. If you look at all the different regions of the schools, they always compare themselves to the area local schools because, again, demographics tend to be similar for it. You can look at state, you can look at the town next to you, you can look at Western Mass, you can look at DART scores. There's 100 different ways that you can look at it. But typically, when you look at schools and how they compare themselves, they use state and they use their geographic region.
Outside of COVID and strictly asking about like the MCAS test, from 2019, has that test changed? Do they change it annually, or is it exactly the same test that those students back in 2019 took?
The test is based off of the standards. The questions are different every year.
Okay.
And it's still based off of the Massachusetts state frameworks and the standards. So
We really think across the state, this is still just really that bad coming out of
I mean,
COVID?
that's what they had up there. That's the state, again, we're nowhere near our pre-pandemic numbers, and we've seen that consistently over the past few years. We also saw the slide of chronic absenteeism. I talked about it last week. I don't have all the numbers, maybe the principals do. The high school's the one I know most closely. We had 25% of our high school students missing over 25%. I'm sorry, we had 25% of our high school kids being chronically absent last year, missing 18 or more days. We had 40% of our special education students being chronically absent, missing 18 or more days. Ken, do you happen to know your numbers off the top of your head?
Well, I think I presented, we had 49% of our students missing 10 or more days.
Okay. Bob, do you know yours off the top of your head?
I believe it went down about 10%.
Okay. So the numbers, when kids aren't in school, it's a struggle for them to learn. I wonder how much of that is playing into the decline in scores, not only locally, but across the state.
I know we talked about last week re-communicating what the sick policies are post-COVID. I would love updates from you guys when you come up, if that was communicated to parents, because I definitely think that's a huge piece. People still think we're in the cough and you go home realm, so.
My newsletter to go out, I couldn't get it out last week because of some sharing things, but it's in the, going out this week, the
And
sick
then
policy.
I would love to hear too where we're at with ISSPs, because I think that is going to be a huge I hope we see a huge improvement with the ISSPs in place this year.
We did, at the professional development day that we had on Friday, staff spent a lot of time writing those ISSPs. They're still not complete. We met today. They're still finalizing them based off of the last STAR data. But one of the things they looked at is STAR gives you the ability to group kids by areas of strength and areas of weakness. So they were able to look at those groupings. I sat with the second grade and the fifth grade for a little bit of time on Friday. So it's able to bunch the kids in like areas of weakness. The other thing it does is it highlights, for instance, what focus areas the students should be working on. So the focus areas, the way they explained it 2 weeks ago when I was at a workshop on it, is those focus areas are the ones that if you hit those, they open up the ability to hit multiple areas of weakness. So it's a little lightning bolt by the standard. So you might have a student who has 20 areas of weakness, and what they tell you to do is if you focus in on the 3 focus areas, that's going to give you the most bang for your buck, because it's also going to help you get to the other ones that aren't highlighted. So what teachers are doing is, let's say they had a student who had 7 focus areas, or a group of kids who had 7 focus areas. What they're looking at is, okay, what are you teaching over the next 6 to 8 weeks that a student's going to need those focus areas to be successful in? Teachers say, we don't do that till June, we don't do that till May, that one we're doing in 4 weeks. So that becomes part of the ISSP of what they're doing. Some teachers said, I sat with one grade level, and they said, there isn't anything on here that we're doing in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I go, okay, what are 1 or 2 things that you think that every kid should learn in order to be successful now or in the next chunk of 4 to 6 weeks? And they said, number 2. So I go, that becomes part of your ISSP. And that's how they worked on creating them and developing, at least for the 2 grades that I sat with for a period of time. And then I was at the high school social studies department focusing on attendance and what they were going to do for attendance, and they analyzed the attendance piece. They were actually shocked at that. When I shared that slide with them, they were shocked at how attendance correlates with student success. And they were shocked to hear the numbers and the percentages of kids missing. 25% of the school, that's roughly, with 300 kids, if my math is correct, that's about 90 kids, missing 18 days of school. There's 36 weeks in a school year, that's a day every other week. It's a lot. It's a lot of school.
Can I just piggyback, the ISSSPs, parents are going to be able to have access to those?
I'm going to send something out in the newsletter this week that's in there that says if you
So
have
I
questions
think-
as to what it looks like, please just
I think
contact
that's
the
the
child.
key to the success. It goes with the messaging.
Yep.
We need your child present, but social emotional, right? That's, I think, is a huge component of this too as well. Our kids are not well,
No.
right? And while I would love to see, we're going to put kids first and their social emotional needs have to come first before test scores, right? But it's part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so, while I'm not happy with where we're at, right? I think we all recognize the staff is putting in the effort. We're trying to, come up with different ways of teaching and getting at how to make that child succeed. But it's just one component. This is just one thing. And if we're focusing so hard on the MCAS, we're going to let the kids fall through the cracks. And I don't want a child to feel that the MCAS is the end-all, be-all, right? Because it's not.
100%.
And so, whatever we can do, like I said, I want to hear more about what we are going to do to try to improve the scores. We got to get our kids well. That, to me, as a parent, we got to get our kids well. Social and emotional needs of our kids is paramount in my mind. It has to become before these test scores.
I mean, principals can talk about vaguely, without compromising the identity of anyone, some of the SEL stuff they're seeing inside, across the board for all of our kids. It's a lot, and I've said it, 5 years ago, I've said it 10 years ago. If you're not healthy here and here, you can't learn. And there's a lot.
Douglas problem.
It's not a Douglas, it's an everyone
Exactly.
problem, And again, we don't want to get, into what's going on in the world out there, but kids have access to a whole lot of social media that they didn't have access to pre-pandemic or 15 years ago. I mean, TikTok, Snapchat, I mean, we can't even keep up with, whatever was 10 years ago, you went on Facebook, that was it, maybe people ventured into Twitter. Now there's, Julia, you got to help me out here, this is what you do.
I'm going to age myself too, so that's all right.
But I mean, there's Snapchat.
Ask the youngster in the room.
Snapchat, there's Twitter, there's Facebook, there's
Yeah,
no
it's-
end to the social media platforms that people are going on and kids are getting information. There's TikTok, there's
YouTube.
YouTube.
MySpace.
Snapchat.
No, there's no MySpace.
No
There's no MySpace.
Instagram. See?
Yeah.
I'm dating myself.
And everyone's deleted their Napster account as well, too.
Oh, my God.
Those of us who are, but there's a lot of stuff, and you look at what's going on inside the classrooms. I was reading through some of the teachers' SMART goals today, just to go through, they would do, so some of these SMART goals are 2 pages long that teachers are looking at and reading, and even though it didn't fit into the SMART format for some, there was a high level of analysis and reflection when you did it. I was looking at some of the MCAS data of where we were below the state average. I think Ken and I were doing it for the elementary school. It was really interesting when looking at students reading passages. If it was just basic level knowledge, they were at or above the state level average. Anything that involved any level of critical thinking or inference, that second or third layer,
That's learning.
it was, they struggled in. I think I told a story here last week. I was in a classroom, and the teacher was going through a word problem with kids, and she wanted me to model with them what good peer interaction is and questioning is, because the kids just read the first part of the question and didn't read steps 2, 3, and 4, and that's where the juice came in. That's where the meat of the question came in. So we did that. Kids are really good reading that first thing and that not going any further. So it was slow down, read the whole question. I was talking to Jess Finley over at the middle school about a month ago, and she noticed that multi-step questions in math kids struggled with. And one of the slides that Bob will show is, I think it was in math, I don't know if it was in ELA as well, but it was definitely in math. They had 2 or 3 focus areas last year of what they wanted to do, and they saw a spike in scores in those focus areas, so now they're gonna add additional focus areas to do it. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but again, it's one metric, it's one day, it's one snapshot in time, and we know if a kid's coming in hungry, if a kid's coming in agitated, if a kid's coming in a bad mood, it throws it off. But the other side of it is, we need to make sure we're hitting all the standards, we need to make sure we're covering all the standards, we need to make sure we're using our programs with fidelity to the full extent of what we have, to make sure that all of our students who have that opportunity are succeeding at a high level too. So it's that constant balance.
Do you feel like we already have something in place specifically in the grades that really seem to need to be addressed?
There's a couple grade levels that I've had extensive conversations with principals, and it's really tough when you talk about grade levels because in some grades there's only 4 people, right? So when you're talking ELA, you know who you're talking. So I want to be careful publicly having those conversations. You know, there's only one, for instance, there's only one AP Stats teacher. So when you're talking about AP Stats, it's not like it's vague. You know who you're specifically doing. Principals have a good handle based off of the conversations I've had with them this year, addressing some things. A lot of changes happened the end of last year. A lot of changes happened over the summer. So we're hoping to see the fruits of those labor. We're going to continue doing the monitoring on STAR. Like I said, I went to a PD last week on STAR, learned a little bit more about it. Every year we get better and better using it. Every year we dive into more reports. So we'll share that with you in the next round when we do another round of testing. I think I answered the question.
I mean, I get it. We can't like address every, you know, I hear the concerns about 5th and 7th. We've talked about 5th grade a lot. I think we already have a great, you know, new plan in place, and, you know.
If you look at, again, 7th grade ELA has been flat, if not dipped. If you look at 7th grade math scores, they were on the upswing from last year to this year. And you'll see that in a chart further ahead if memory serves me correctly. So again, some of the stuff that Mr. O'Brien put in place last year in math kind of helped with that uptick. The other thing to remember is with such small number of kids, 4 or 5 kids changes those percentages one way or the other. Anything else? All right. Mr. Haynes, come on up. Hold on, let me see. All right.
Sorry. Good evening.
Evening.
I'd like to maybe speak to your last question, if you don't mind, just to start, and as opposed to next slide, next slide, next slide. Sorry, because there are a lot.
Absolutely.
And anyway, though, and please feel free to ask questions. This is important. But I think instead of talking about individual grades or whatnot, I think, at least with us, right, and you saw those scores in the Valley, and I really want to thank Mr. O'Brien, because I feel like his building has kind of helped lift our mean there and made us look better. And so, but it's, it's really a group thing, right? It's a cultural thing. And what we're trying to do, and I have to give the teachers a ton of credit, because they're, they were working super hard on the day I arrived last year, around this time last year, and they were working really hard, but they were all just sort of kind of holding their own, right? There wasn't sort of that leadership in place, and they were trying to do their best to meet the needs of their students and their families. But some of the kind of the cultural stuff, school-wide cultural stuff, that really kind of wasn't really there, because it it wasn't being driven necessarily. There's just a lot of things going on, right? But they were working hard, right? And so what we've been trying to do, sort of since last year and transitioning into this year, is sort of create a culture that will benefit all the kids. And when I say that, I mean academically, I mean social, emotionally. And I just feel like, I'll give you an example. There was a goal last year with the team around social studies, right? And so, but the issue in years prior to that, and in MCAS scores prior to that, were around math and ELA, right? And Grant, I get it about the whole MCAS thing, but it's but it does, to some extent, tell a story, right, about the learning and whatnot. So it has to be taken seriously. So one thing I remember wondering is, if these scores need to be improved, why is the focus with this team on social studies, right? Like so that was kind of one example of things that we're trying to do over at the elementary school right now, like kind of on a cultural level, right? Is getting everyone sort of on board, going in the same direction, and having their focus be on what it needs to be on, right? Like and if you look at the MCAS, and if you look at our STAR scores from last year, as we all did, and we talked about, we discussed, those are things that really need to be improved, right? So right, really from the start of the year, the end of last year, but really kind of going into this year, the focus has been on everyone just sort of rowing in the same direction, and just trying to be really focused on the ELA, on the math, and on the SEL too. So we're integrating that as well, and I'm really seeing that, right? Like, we spent so much of Friday just focusing on ways that we can improve the data. The teachers have been really open to looking at data, working with data. We've spent more time with data. I've spent more time with teachers with data at this point this year than I did all of last year, right? And I'm just seeing that buy-in. All of our common planning times, the focus has been on data. Teachers were totally open to learning about how to get more out of STAR. STAR's capability is tremendous, and we were really just scratching the surface. And teachers were learning how they could pull up reports that would tell them how to group kids and what those groups of kids need. And then now what they're doing is that they're taking that data and they're creating interventions and working with students. So that's all in place. And then I had a couple of CPT today and yesterday where I was like, okay, guys, we're really starting to get some, we're starting to get rolling with the STAR. Let's look at the MCAS results, because they're out, and let's look at those areas that we didn't perform so well. And they were open to that. So it's early in the year, and now is the time, right? And before you know it, you're midway through the year. And so teachers are being really open and willing to work with all that data to learn these expand their skill set in using the STAR, and we're kind of creating a culture there where I think we're just all more focused on what we need to be focused on. You take that same effort that's always been there, and you add a better focus, and I think you'll see results. And so that's really what we're doing at the elementary school, and it's been really. I'm looking forward to seeing the results as we move along. We're doing 5 STAR tests, and so it'll be really interesting. And teachers are already, they're anxious to see what the results look like in November, and then did we see improvement, and then what do we need to work on from there? So that's a big part of what's going on at our school, and I'm really encouraged by it, and I hope you will be too. But I do understand the concerns around the MCAS scores and what we've seen, but we are really working hard to address it, and yes. So I'll start. That's it. And then, as you can see, going to the slides now. Sorry. So we are making moderate progress towards our targets. If you want to forward that slide, if you look up there in terms of the points, right? As far as achievement goes, we did not perform well in terms of achievement when it relates to math or ELA. We didn't meet any of our targets there, with the exception of those students that are more in need, right? We did pretty well with that population, and then we did well with science. We did, however, do a little bit better with growth, right? So how are the students themselves progressing? So we did attain some points, attain some of our targets in ELA, in math, in the area of growth. Do we attain all of our targets? No. But there's opportunity for improvement there. And if you look down below, you can see absenteeism was a big issue last year. And we actually had a small group on our PD day the other day that they were focused on working on the absentee issue at the school and some strategies that we're going to implement. So, yeah. And now we'll get into some of the highlights of the data. We exceeded those achievement targets on all students in the science. I already touched on that. Some of the targets with math and ELA, low performing. And then in terms of opportunities, we had no points, math and ELA. But those things that I mentioned leading this presentation off, we're going to change that. And then, of course, the absenteeism.
And we'll talk a little bit once you dive into the grade level, some of the stuff you're doing in common planning time with people.
So grade 3, to start. And if you look there, just again, over on the left there, that's student growth, right? You don't see that for grade 3 because there's nothing to gauge that against. But just pay close attention to that growth as we go through these slides. But you can see that the grade 3 students, they did exceed the state in the essay writing in the areas of development, idea development, and language. One thing I did notice that was pretty consistent is in terms of the not meeting expectations. I didn't really feel like if you look at our scores, we don't have a high percentage of students related to the state in terms of not meeting, right? So that's one thing that is encouraging. It was only 6%, whereas the state level is 18. We have a lot of partially meeting. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of partially meeting, not a lot of not meeting. So that's one sort of encouraging thing. If we can take them from partially meeting to meeting, then that's the goal, right? Schools' high-need students exceeded the state, so the supports that were in place for our high-need students are having any impact there. And then in terms of opportunities, 57% partially and not meeting. Again, most of those are partially meeting. And we underperform versus the state in idea development within the text. So that's just one sort of skill area, one standard, if you will, where there's an opportunity to improve. And I'll touch on that a little bit as, like, we did start, a couple of teams, we started to go through that MCAS data. And some of it is really revealing, like, because we'll see how our school's performance differs from that of the state level on a standard by standard basis, on an item by item basis. And there's one where there was a 36%, we underperformed from the state 36%. That right there is like, okay, we have to teach that better. But you can really, like, glean a lot of information. It can really guide you, like, when you look at where those big gaps are between how we perform in the state. And that's what we were talking about today. I was saying, let's go back a few years. Let's pull up those problems. Let's present them to our students, have them try them, and then talk them through and address those areas. And now's the time to get at it because we can weave that into our instruction throughout the year. So, in terms of math, best math score. Last year, the best math scores for the third grade in the last 4 years. We exceeded state in terms of the students' performance on word problems. And again, the percentage of students not meeting 11% was only half that of the state. So again, not a lot of red, a lot of yellow, but not a lot of red. So, and then in terms of opportunities, majority of the students, 62% are still only partially meeting or not meeting. So we want to really get them from that into the green. Our high need students at the grade 3 level in math lower than the state. And geometry in terms of a particular area of weakness, I didn't see a consistent pattern, like from, data analysis or geometry or whatnot. It just kind of varied from grade to grade. With grade 3, geometry seemed to be an area of weakness.
Can you talk a little bit of some of the shifts you made in your common planning time from last year to this year?
Yeah.
To have a greater focus on those academic discussions?
Yes, absolutely. So as far as when we would meet in common planning times would take place last year, sometimes they'd talk about field trips, or sometimes they'd talk about, maybe some curriculum, or let's try this, or, they weren't not productive, but they weren't focused, right? And next thing you know, that time goes by very, very quickly. So what we're doing now this year is that for our common planning time, we'll go into common planning time and it's like, okay, today we're going to focus on this data, like maybe it's going to be the ELA STAR data, right? And then next week we'll focus on the new STAR math data. And the meeting today and yesterday, I said, okay, next week we're going to carry over into the MCAS because the MCAS results just came out. They're doing their thing with the STAR data, and now as a group, as a team, we're going to focus on the MCAS data. So we're going to have a lot of balls in the air, but again, it's about using the results of the data to guide your practice. What areas need to be addressed with our students? And those are the conversations that we're having now. And then there might be a time where, like once a month, we'll also maybe focus on the social studies and the science too. We don't want to neglect anything. So, but again, typically every week when I send out an email, I tell the teachers what the focus will be for the CPTs that week, so they know going in what to expect.
Can I ask you something specific to grade 3?
Of course.
So when you're having that conversation with a specific grade, I guess, and you see geometry, are you addressing it with the 3rd grade team to get that class in a better spot with geometry for this year's MCAS, or are you addressing it with grade 4 in order to catch up the grade that actually took
That's an
this
excellent
test?
point. No, it's a great point. Well, I guess what I'm doing, what we'll do is, like, in terms of those areas that we'll focus on that. If they perform poor, like not so well in a particular area at the end of the year, right? We'll look at the question, we'll go back, we'll look at those questions for that team, right, and focus on it. But it's an excellent point, because I should probably see where those other kids are going. Fortunately, that didn't seem to be an area of weakness for the 4th grade. So
Okay.
hopefully that will be, that will continue.
It'll catch it up from where they lacked in 3rd.
But that's another point, that's a great point that you bring up that, is worth having a look at, right? So we can kind of look at
The
the
hope is
assessments.
when the 4th graders, so in 3rd grade, when you know you were weak in geometry, you look back and you reflect on what you didn't do over the year, and you fix that for the current 3rd graders. But the beauty of STAR is, or if you consider it a beauty, the beauty of STAR is when the kids are in the 4th grade and they're taking the STAR assessment and there are those questions on geometry, it'll flag the kids who are weak in geometry to give the 4th grade teachers a heads up as to, here are the kids who we need to strengthen some of these geometry standards in.
Yeah, I do not envy you guys trying to piece together the data
but
from
it's-
class to class and where that falls.
And you're comparing, obviously, too, different cohorts. So,
Right.
you look, you can have variables from, 25 in a class to 20 in a class. So that could play a role into it. It could play a role as to when you taught geometry, you might have had a big rash of COVID, and you had a lot of kids absent who missed the instruction for that week's worth of time. It could be, the air conditioner wasn't working in a building and you're teaching in May, and we all know what it's like teaching. It's tough to maintain attention. I mean, we saw, just, anecdotally, we saw it with staff and even myself. We had the PD day on Friday, and the Jackie Sullivan brought the Smash Burger truck to us, so staff got to go out and have smash burgers. When you have a smash burger for lunch at 12 o'clock, it's like eating Thanksgiving dinner. So you have kids sometimes, and I've seen some of these kids eat in the cafeteria. It's a lot different what you can get for instruction out of a child and for push, which is why elementary does a lot before lunch in the morning and not after lunch. So you have all those variables that play into it. And again, they're not excuses, they're just the reality of what
No,
happens.
I just want to make sure that we're,
But
again, the
your question's a
MCAS
good
is so
question.
hard. I get it, but I just want to make sure with those areas that we really want everyone to know the school is addressing is
Sure.
being looked at in both grade levels.
I don't like to see these high percentages in terms of gaps between state performance and our performance, but when I do see them, it's kind of an opportunity, right? It's like, okay, we need to work on that, right? And so it's sometimes it's really nice to know specifically what you need to address, so it's very informative in that regard.
Did we did math already? So this was taken through a company called Open Architect. We have access to it. You used to have to pay for the service, now it's free. Just another way to look at the data, and they provide it to all schools. So they uploaded our data. You can manipulate things a bunch of different ways. But here you can see just another graphic of a trend line for where we compare to the state in terms of students meeting or exceeding expectations. So the green line is Douglas, and the dotted black line is the state. So you can see that, again, in 2020, 2021, 2022, in grade 3, we were above the state average. We dipped, and now we're going back up in grade 3. In math, again, you can see the dip going back up, that we went up in 22, a little bit down in 23, back up in '24. Again, still below the state average and still work to do, but you can see that upward trend, which is different than what we saw in the state from '23 to '24.
All right, so moving on to fourth grade, again, that growth percentage, SGP, 51%, which is encouraging. The essay and paragraph writing at grade 4, it slightly exceeded the state. Not meeting is more than 33% lower than the state. So again, like the red has typically been less than the state, which has been encouraging. Opportunities, lowest exceeding and meeting in the last 4 years. Combined partially meeting, not meeting is slightly higher than the state. Our high-need students underperform versus the state, and only 38 and 40% of the point total were attained when providing evidence. So that, again, these are when you sort of start to get into some specifics that you can work with kids on that, on providing evidence to support a point or, so anyway, and this is when the data really informs your practice and guides your practice, so.
And when you're looking at SGP, for those who don't deal with it on a regular basis, anything above 50% means you grew a year in a year. So that's what you want to see. You want to see kids starting at point A and then growing 180 days by the end of the year, and that's your 50%. So when you see a growth average, or you see an individual child's growth average over 50%, you know they learned a year's worth of material, grew a year in a year. Below 50 is obviously less. Higher than 50 is they obviously learned more or grew more than a year's worth of growth in a year. So fourth grade here, we have 51. We don't see it in the third grade because you don't have the second grade MCAS to compare it to.
In terms of the math, here, interestingly, geometry and measurement data were areas of strength for grade 4. So, and then in terms of opportunities, the growth in math, right? There was an opportunity there, right? 40% growth in math. High need students outperformed by the state, perform below state in multi-step word problems. So right then and there's a particular skill that we can work on. And then inconsistency in terms of the computation skills. So that's sort of some basic stuff, right? We have our intervention blocks, right, that we have now that's worked into the schedule, that there's a way you can work with the kids on something specific. So.
And Ken, when you go back, can you just look at those numbers again? I don't know if 3%, 34, 48, and 48 equals 100. Or exceeding, meeting, partially meeting, and not meeting.
Yep.
I don't know if you flipped
I think I'm
14
yeah.
and
I can
48.
look. Sorry, I have it right here. Thank you.
Doing that quick math over there.
Yeah. So
Well, I know 48, 48,
Right? I'm like-
is
I'm like-
over 100,
But I
so I
wasn't-
knew we were
But I
wrong.
wasn't gonna catch it.
Oh, boy, yeah.
We were wrong.
So exceeding, right, for the math, 3%, right? 34, that is correct for meeting. Partially meeting, 48. Oh, that's my not meeting. That was my mistake. Excuse me. 14. So that was that was my error. So not meeting is only 14%, fortunately, but the student, yeah, right. So that is, yeah.
And what's the SGP? Do you have that?
SGP for fourth grade math, that is 46. So that's correct. The where it says opportunities, 46 growth in math, that is correct, but it's not 14. So that's
encouraging.
Yeah.
it is encouraging. Yes, and
46,
sorry,
much better on
that was my error. Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you for catching that, Dr. Vieira.
And again, concerning, we see the trend lines from the state. If you look at ELA, we were above the state there in 19, 20, 21. We dipped below in 22. We went back up in 23, and just like state trends, dipped in 24. You can see in math, although again, some concerning numbers there, in the concern that we dipped from 23 to 24, you could see the growth of where we were from 21 and 22, that we've made some gains there. You can even see the state, you can see that little bow in the state, that we kind of mirror those trends in grade 4.
So for fifth grade, ELA, Again, if you look at over to the left there, the student growth is 31%, and the reading scores were consistent with the state. That was one thing that I noticed is writing seemed to be, in comparison to reading, appeared to be a little bit of a weakness in terms of the overall scores. It's spent a lot of time with these numbers, so forgive me, but here the reading scores were consistent with the state, not so much the essay scores. So opportunity 73%, partially meeting or not meeting. So so that's right. So that's a real opportunity. Again, not a lot of in not meeting, only 21%. But again, we need to shift them all up. Idea development and language demonstrate as areas of weakness for a state in essay writing. The essay writing was where it seemed to be the most significant weakness. Again, the reading would seem to be more of an area of strength in comparison to the writing. 50% increase in students not meeting expectations from 23. So that was not a good trend. And then again, overall writing, greater area of need versus the reading. So again, the data can inform your practice, tell you what you need to work on. And from this, we need to work on writing.
And that is alarming, where we have 73%. That's the highest, I think, in the district in any grade level. 73% of our kids, only 27% meeting or exceeding expectations. That's low.
Do you know off the top of your head in 5th grade, if when they are writing in the classroom, if they are writing in this regard, or if they are typing? Because we know that MCAS, they have to type these answers, and I know Dr. Vera brought it up like 2 weeks ago that I think someone mentioned that it helps with test scores. I feel like this is a group, right, where that pen to paper versus typing might be a thing. Do we know what they do in class?
They do a little bit of both. They got the new Chromebooks, right? So they do a little bit of both. They do a lot of work on the new Chromebooks. So, but that one thing that has come up is the keyboarding.
Yeah.
So we have, the librarian, and Mr. Haynes has talked to her about incorporating typing starting grade 2. They're using the Chromebooks a lot, but a lot of it is for ST Math. It's for like those educational things. They need to be doing more keyboarding to learn those skills. I had the conversation with some 6th grade teachers, and there's a lot of this. And something that I thought we were beyond, but we're not beyond, is the cutting and pasting, the Control X, Control V. I'm a Mac person.
That's not how it's done.
What? Excuse me?
I said that's not how it's done, but okay. On regular, like.
On regular, yeah. So whatever but said a lot of kids are struggling because they're coming from and no fault of teachers, is we need to do a better job not only teaching the actual keyboarding, but going back to when we were in school. Well, I didn't have bolding and highlighting and underlining, but going back to teaching those skills to students. So I know Ken's done it, and I know Bob is doing some work for one of the upcoming electives to have kids start doing some keyboarding. And again, I saw it when I looked at the test scores. It was interesting looking at the essay components, where you had about, again, the numbers might be off, but you had about 50 to 60% of the kids answering multiple choice questions correctly or getting total points. But in the essay portion, only getting like 20 to 30. And then when they went to 4th grade, it was 25 to 35. And every year that they got older, you saw that essay total points growing. And again, I don't know how I would get that data analysis to know how much of it was related to keyboarding or not keyboarding. But when 6th grade teachers are saying there's a lot of this,
Yeah.
we need to do work on keyboarding.
Well, I wonder too, like, I have no data, I have no idea, but like, when you think about writing, like, I think there's a difference how your brain can create an essay when you're writing versus typing, and I'm just wondering if they're getting exposure to both. And do you know what I mean? If they're writing everything all year long, and then you throw them on a keyboard, they can't process their thoughts to get the words out.
If it's an unfamiliar way for them to process their thoughts, right, and
Right.
communicate it, it's, right, they're in unfamiliar territory enough as it is when they do right? So to then try to, right, process when you're not comfortable, which is why every time I've been posing the idea to the teachers about possibly doing some of the keyboarding work, and it's been sort of universally embraced. So we're now looking at options, but I think it's definitely worth pursuing. And with the math, we did an increase over exceeding expectations and meeting expectations. Measurement and data, again, as you can see across the board, there's no one really area of weakness, so, but again, can inform us on what we can work on. Geometry and fractions, relative areas of weakness, and I have that example, that problem. It was a 36% discrepancy with the state and our performance, and it was a question area of a rectangle involving fraction length. So you take the two, and it was kind of that was one area. That problem right there tells you specifically what you could work on with the students. But interestingly, it also reflects an overall weakness that I noticed in geometry and fractions. 27% growth, so the growth is not where it needs to be, and we were outperformed by the state on 80% of the problems overall. So there's a lot of work to be done.
It's I just to pull something up from one of the things we did this summer, I think I talked about it 2 weeks ago, is all the walkthroughs that principals are doing and directors, we're asking them to focus in on and make sure they're making comments and giving feedback to teachers on 3 areas. One is lessons and activities differentiated to meet the various needs of our students. So when they're going in, are they looking to see the differentiation inside the classroom? Are they doing things to work with the high achieving kids, for the kids in the middle, and for our struggling learners? So providing teachers feedback on that. Lesson plans will include multiple means of presenting information to kids. We know when kids are engaged, right, they learn better. So are we seeing multiple means of the way information is being presented? Obviously, when you're going in, you're doing a 10-minute workshop, you might only see 1 or 2, but do we see multiple means of information being presented to kids? Not all kids learn with stand and deliver. Not all kids learn with lecture. Next, we talked about students will be provided with alternative methods and choices based on interest levels and skills. You can't do that all the time, but you talk a lot about choice boards, you talk a lot about station work, you talk a lot about giving kids different ways to share information with teachers to show they know information. And then finally, evidence of UDL and our DCAP in there. What did we see for how teachers remove barriers? What did we see for how teachers differentiated? What do we see for how teachers presented information? I've spent some time reading some of Mr. O'Brien's write-ups because he tells me, Paul, read this one, it's really good. Well, Paul, read this one, I'd like some feedback. And principals are providing that level of feedback there. So we're trying to get away from just surface level feedback to staff when we do the observations, and trying to incorporate a lot of this language, which should help with this in the feedback to staff. So again, just something different that we're trying this year to try to boost the scores.
And then lastly, the science and technology engineering scores, the highlights higher, exceeding and meeting than in 23. We outperformed the state on 54% of the problems, and we essentially matched state performance in each of the categories. So there wasn't a big discrepancy anywhere: earth and space, life, physical, technology, and engineering. And something nice is the fact that we have the STEM teacher now, and it's wonderful because her goal is focused on the curriculum, right? She's looking at some STEM standards, and her goal is to, as she builds out the curriculum there, is focused on the science and technology standards at the elementary level.
And just I want to give some kudos, to Ms. Herman, who is our STEM teacher. Mr. Smith in the primary school has now competition for the best and favorite special. It used to be hands down Mr. Smith. Now it's running a tie between STEM and PE, which couldn't be more polar opposite, but the kids are really enjoying the STEM activities that Amanda is doing with them in there. So that's been a great add. We added the position last year, and kids are really enjoying that at the primary.
And then, go ahead, sorry. I was just going to say the opportunity, still partially meeting, not meeting, we're still, not where we need to be, but.
So again, looking at the state comparisons, again, we're below the state average. In ELA, we saw it flat, which is consistent with the state. You can see in math, we're well below the state average and have been for a few years. We did buck the state trend in going upwards, but again, even with the gains that we made from 23 to 24 in kids meeting or exceeding expectations, we're still well below the state average. So again, I know we showed that slide to start, which is something to celebrate, that our kids did better and teachers changed some things from 23 to 24, but we're still below the state average there. And in science, you can see the spike up from 23 to 24.
But again, in summary, we are working differently at the elementary school and much more focused, and I'm encouraged to see where it goes. So thank you. Any questions?
No, but thank you. It sounds like you have really focused in on what needs to be done, and I look forward to, if it still exists, the day of the next year.
Thank you. Thanks.
I have to say, one thing I really liked was that you did highlights, but you also really plainly spelled out the opportunities instead of kind of glossing over them.
I'm not comfortable, right? With those numbers, and I like working here, and I want to, I want to see an upward trajectory, and I'm not comfortable with I'm glad there's not a lot of red. But a lot of the yellows and whatnot. There's too much of that. But I just really feel like it makes the job interesting. You know what I mean? When you can see where the problems are and work together to figure out how to address them, and that's what I feel like we're doing. So I feel like we're going in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Brian.
Good evening. Ms. Moore and Chairperson, I would like to thank you for bringing up the SEL component. I know my first year here that we had over 30 suicide ideation or suicide attempts amongst the student body. We were able to bring in an extra counselor, and we did a lot of work around that for the students. So I appreciate you recognizing that. And these scores are certainly reason to celebrate, and then reason to pause and scratch our head and say, okay, why did this happen and how can we make it better? So overall, for our accountability data, it's, back one slide, 66%. We jumped from 57 to 73 on our targets that we're supposed to look at, that the state recommended. And our chronic absenteeism, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I think it went down to about 10%. It went down about a third to a half.
I know that was one of Bob's goals last year, was to reduce chronic absenteeism, so you can see he exceeded his targets. What were some of the things you put in place to target?
It's a lot of that personal message with the family. If the student is out sick or has an issue, just getting in touch with them, talking to them, inviting them in. Have the kids show up after, if it's a school-phobic type thing, after everyone gets out. Put them with an attendance buddy, anything that we can think of. But it really has to be that one-on-one conversation, and then making sure that we're tracking the data so we know who to check in on. Because sometimes the kids fly below the radar, you don't notice them. So every so often we print up anyone more than 3 absences, and we check in with them. On our accountability data, this is where we exceeded the target that the state set for us. And lowest performing, high needs, low income, students with disabilities, white, Hispanic, low income, and white. Our path forward, we all exceeded the target that the state put out for us. Well, kudos to the entire school staff for that. 6th grade highlights outscored the state in 3 writing standards by plus 20%. Outscored the state in 32 of 37 questions in grade 6. 19% of 6th graders scored exceeding expectations. It says 15 up there. I think Ms. Martin said it might have hacked in and changed some numbers. Not meeting expectation for the middle school was only 9%, whereas the state is 25%. And our student growth percentile for ELA was 76%.
Just to put that into perspective for those of us who forget our bell curve, 40 to 60 is where 60% of the world lives. 0 to 39% is where 20% lives, and then 61 to 100 is where the other 20% live. That 76 growth outscored 90%. They were in the top 90% of kids across the Commonwealth in the 6th grade. So where they were when they walked into the 6th grade to here where Miss Martinson took them in the 6th grade was 76% growth in that upper portion of the bell curve, which is spectacular.
Big kudos to Ms.
Yeah.
Martinson. Yeah.
You talk about students crying at MCAS. Do not see the lovely Mrs. Martinson around MCAS time because she was very
And
stressed and
she was
high-pressured.
super stressed out about her scores because she was worried. And even when she saw the 15 and the 26, what is that, a 51% meeting exceeding expectations, she was beating herself up that it should have been more, should have been more. But it was 76% growth, which is so high.
And yet, working with the English department, we realized that we have to increase poetry knowledge among students. That's where we're lacking in the curriculum. Punctuation for a specific purpose. Students had a hard time understanding that, so we have to do a better job teaching it. And we got to continue to work on idea development and writing. Grade 6 math, student growth percentile of 77%. I know we had only 2 exceeding expectation. We outscored the state by double digits in 25% of the questions. Outscored 53 to 49 for students with disabilities. And we're going stronger, and the superintendent touched on this. In multi-select questions, that was a struggle for us 2 years ago. We really focused on that. And we went from -17 to, that should say -2, looks a little funky up there, and from -12 to +2. I love this for an example to show that if you find an opportunity and you work at it and you set your goals, it will work better. The real-world problem solving was an issue. In math and science last year, we connected those two, and we're doing that in grades 6 through and 8 this year. Least common multiple of 2 numbers was a challenge, and we have to allot the teachers 6, 7, and 8 time with the new curriculum. They had 2 hours on a professional development day to work on that with the company. And we also arranged the schedule where they could all have prep at the same time, so they can do vertical as well as their common planning time alignment.
Can we just highlight that again, Bob, just to make sure people understand the difference of what you've done?
So common planning time is when you get down and dirty with the data. You make your ISSPs. Sometimes you'll have a parent meeting at that time.
That's grade level, correct?
Excuse me?
Was that grade level?
It's grade level. So common planning time is the whole grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. But then we were also able to have ELA and math have the same prep time, so that will work vertical.
I'll continue with the trend. So again, if you look at the trend lines for Douglas versus the state, again, you can see that in ELA, again, follow the same trends of a decline in percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations in ELA. But in this graph, you can see we're well above the state average. And the same thing in math. We changed the state trend where we it went up, students meeting or exceeding from 23 to 24. And again, you can see us, again, above the state average. You can see how our trend in math is pretty consistent with how it is across the state.
Okay, I'm shouting out Miss Finlay too, because I already shouted out Miss Martinson, so.
Okay.
And all of those 6th grade teachers, they make such a great team, and everyone in the building, from the ladies making the food and lunch, to the paras, to the dean of students, to the custodians, everyone. It's a team effort. ELA, we've always taken a dip in ELA in grade 7 in math as well. If any of you had a 7th grader go through the system, or we're lucky enough to have a 7th grade as a student, I know my kids, this was probably the most challenging year, grade 7.
Yep.
But that's no excuse for us not to keep trying harder.
Yep.
In determining the meaning of a phrase, they scored 96%, which I don't know, I've never seen a number in the 90s on one particular item. And I did find out only 1/2 of 1% of students have ever answered every MCAS question correctly. So.
What was that, 1/2?
1/2 of 1% has ever answered every single question on the MCAS correctly. But here's a nice thing to look at in ELA grade 7, decreased not meeting expectations by 20%. And again, that was a focus of us with the our start of the ISSPs, focusing on students of need. That's a nice number right there. Student growth percentile 32, we got to get that up in the 50s. Our opportunities, again, more poetry knowledge, longer writing, more rigor, and building more writing opportunities school-wide. So even if they're in a class that's not exactly a writing class, build that into it. And I know we started doing that with history last year. That's being continued this year as well. And we're also, hopefully next quarter, we're going to have a keyboarding class as an enrichment class.
But
I
that
think that'll
writing-
pay dividends.
Go ahead.
I think it'll pay dividends because if kids aren't used to again, thought to paper, you can do this, erase it, but on the keyboard, you have to backspace, where is that? If
So
they're
when
not oriented to it, it's a struggle.
When the students do the writing portion of the MCAS, they do get to write a draft sample. And then they take that and they type it in. Part of my responsibilities include shredding all that information. And I saw pages of pages handwritten, and I'm like, our scores are going to be through the roof. I don't know if what they're written down on that paper, because I'm not supposed to read them. I just saw the length of it. How is that not getting translated to what's put on the test?
You know, if
You're
it's
saying the kids are writing it and then typing it into the testing.
Correct.
They might not have time or the skill.
Okay.
Got it.
And stamina.
Yeah, at
I mean,
that
if-
point,
if-
they're probably over it.
If you're, if you just exerted, a lot of them are doing graphic organizing, and should be using short phrases, but sometimes they're writing the whole thing. So if you just exerted all that energy, taking the 27 multiple choice questions, and then writing an essay for 2 hours, and then you finish, and you say, now I have to type that into the computer.
Thank you.
For a 13-year-old, they might struggle with that.
Yeah.
So we're trying to build different stamina, and by, Bob's recognized that and has had conversations with the teacher. If we can increase that writing during the school year and make those assignments longer and do it at a more regular basis, hopefully, again, that'll pay dividends when they take the MCAS.
Can I ask a silly question? In this day and age, can you not take a picture of it and load it into Google Doc and then have it translate through?
On the
MCAS doesn't
MCAS?
allow, yeah.
They can't even wear smartwatches during the MCAS.
But I mean, in this day of technology, if that's the concern,
Yeah.
is there a suggestion box? Because to me, that would solve, if they're doing because this to me is just, okay, mind blown, right? But ludicrous. Kids are going to take the time to write it out, and then they have to type it back through, right?
Teresa's looking at me, that's what we do all day. I don't disagree with you, yeah.
Don't disagree.
Yeah.
If we're going to go that far.
But again, if
we should still
it,
have
this
typing.
is not the only time they're gonna have to get their stream of consciousness
Right.
out through typing. So it's like, they need to be able to sit and do MCAS and be able to type their thoughts and have that skill set. Because it's not just right now that they're gonna need it, it's gonna be,
I don't disagree. I'm just saying, we're expecting them to do a lot by the time, because that's the last thing they have to do, right? They've done all the multiple choice,
No.
and now you're going to ask me to do this? I'm doing it for a second time? I know what my kid would do.
100%.
I know what one of my two would do. I know what he did. But again, it's, Bob's recognized that, and he's had the conversations with the 7th grade, that's an area of weakness. And again, we talked about those critical thinking skills that we saw kids lacking. We saw the kids struggling in the 6th grade with those multi-step questions. And again, just incorporating more writing, incorporating longer writing, incorporating more opportunities for kids to write. It only strengthens everything else that they do in ELA and in math and across the curriculum, so.
Grade 7 math, reduce not meeting expectation by 20% for our high needs students. I'll show you a slide on that shortly. Outscored the state by 20% or more on 3 questions, 2 questions by 29%. So we're hitting that target very well. Our student growth percentile was 59. I'd like to see more of that. I think everyone at meeting expectations to exceeding. Real world problems, again, was a focus area we need to improve on. This particular group, they need more work with fractions. And looking at some of the math questions myself, if you don't do it every day, you kind of lose it. And again, that time for the teachers to work with the new curriculum. So if you look at this slide, this is high needs groups for the last, let's see, 21, 22, 23, 24. And
Is this for ELA or for math?
This is for math. So if you look traditionally what it was, and then to see that 5% were exceeding expectations. We haven't had that in 4 years. That was the first time we've had that. And decreasing the amount of students that are not meeting expectation. And that was 5% for high needs. I believe it was 4% for students with special education. It's always nice to see that group in the blue.
And again, the trends in 7th grade, we know we have to do work there. We can see, again, same trend, 23 to 24, the dip, but again, below the state average. If you look at the state average, it's pretty consistent over the past 6-7 years. We've dipped, we've gone back up, and then we dipped down. Math was an issue. We see where we were, we dipped back down. Bob put some things in place from 23 to 24, and again, counter to what the state trend was, we went up from 23 to 24, and we actually exceeded the state average in meeting and exceeding expectations for the 7th grade.
And that's to Ms. Langley gets the shout out on that one. But again, I don't want to give anyone like all the credit or all the blame for these. But the other day was about 4 o'clock, and I saw 3 members from a particular grade level team looking at the MCAS data on the white screen to work on their SMART goals. And I haven't heard people talking about data in a way that it reflects to teaching as much as I've seen this year. So that's a nice little shift that occurred. Highlights in grade 8 ELA were really strong on theme. And if you look at where we competed against the state, it's an average of 1.1% variable. So we're right there with the state. And our reading standards are pretty strong. Again, this poetry keeps knocking up, so we got to get the poetry. And as a recovering ELA teacher and one who named his son after a poet, I'm very excited to dive in on that. And just more opportunities for idea development in their writing. And again, provide that vertical alignment time in grades 6, 7, and 8 that we didn't have before, where these teachers can share their expertise with one another. Eighth grade maths, and I think you remembered there was 1 year for you folks that have been here for a bit where basically Ms. Tamelio taught 2 whole grades, not just 2 classes. She had to fill in for a reason, and I appreciate her work with that, and we're seeing it pay off. Strong real-world problems, strong on statistics, scored lower than the state on only 2 questions, both by 3%. Opportunities, I noticed, and Ms. Tamelio noticed, that our low-income learners in 8th grade math really need a lot more intervention, and that was one of those subgroups that really jumped off the page at us. Continue to align the math department vertically, and again, time for the new curriculum.
Changing the schedule, having the common planning time be grade level, and then the prep time, just doing the subject specific across all grades, like Bob says, gives teachers now the ability to have that vertical and horizontal alignment in the middle school that didn't exist, so those conversations can become richer and deeper. And again, you see the trends here. ELA, just a hair above the state average. We did the dip like we saw consistently across the state. I think looking from this angle, we're just a hair below the state average in ELA. And then if you look in math, again, we went up from 23 to 24, and we've been above the state average consistently for the past 3 years in math. And then this is science.
This is science, correct?
Okay, I had the slides backwards. Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
Scored 98% on materials needed for a prototype, 16% higher than the state. It averaged 70% on the technology and engineering standards. That's what's having a STEM teacher in the program makes happen. So that has been a huge bang for the buck there. Unfortunately, Mr. Caesar went on to greener pastures, but we got a phenomenal new teacher, Danita Murphy, that will pick up there and we'll get our project lead the way trained this summer.
And again, if you look at the comparisons, you can see we went up from 23 to 24, and it looks like they're just slightly above the state average. Any questions for Mr. O'Brien?
I love seeing your student growth percentages.
I'm sorry.
They were
Those
really
growth
good.
numbers are
The
off
student
the
growth
charts.
percentages were, yep.
Yeah, I tip my hat to them and try to get out of their way and let them do their work.
Anything else?
No,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
You always get stuck going last.
Bob said, could we reverse it? Could we do high school and then go backwards? You would still be in the middle either way. It would have been too many slides to reorder. All right.
You know what? I have much fewer slides because MCAS really only affects the 10th grade and some of our 9th grade, so by all means, it's probably kind of a blessing that I'm going last tonight with less to kind of address as far as grade-based stuff goes. Obviously, our accountability data was much better than the year before. We had an accountability score of 84%. That is 100% due to the fact that our MCAS scores were able to meet or exceed their target areas. That is the main reason why we were able to actually achieve that, which is good. Gives us substantial progress towards, towards our targets. Of course, with our accountability data, there's pros and cons. We are still working on the chronic absenteeism bit. Okay, we got 0 points on our chronic absenteeism because we failed to meet any of our targets. Okay, which is why last year we created our attendance policy team. We revamped our attendance policy. We're working through it this year. As of Monday, we'll have our first student meetings with any students that are sniffing that direction. So that's when that is planning to start. Earlier tonight, you guys mentioned a question of what does Sutton and Hopedale do that is different than us, okay? In the few minutes that I had before coming up here, I took a quick little peek, and there was actually one glaring data point between our three schools. So I don't want to misquote, so I'm just going to pull it up real quick. For students that were unexcused greater than 9 days last year, Douglas High School was 39.8% of our population. For Douglas High School was unexcused absences greater than 9 days. In the same breath, Sutton High School had 6.8% of their students unexcused greater than 9 days. And Hopedale was 18.6%. So that's not a deep data dive. That's very much a surface piece. But I think that actually contributes to some of our differences in our schools. Like Dr. Vieira was saying, if students are present, students are learning, students are engaged. There's a lot that goes into that, such as the SEL piece, such as a sense of belonging, such as a lot of other things. So it's obviously something of a focus point for us. We have our attendance meetings every Monday morning to kind of do a deep dive. I know that in a about a week and a half, I have a meeting with Valley principals, which does include Sutton and Hopedale principals. So we will be having a discussion at the minimum, just to kind of see what happens there. What are some of the things that they do that's different than what we do, and maybe be able to incorporate some of their things as we progress and move forward. So again, that wasn't a very deep data dive, but it was a glaring statistic. And I don't know if that has something specifically to do with anything that they do different or better or what, but we're willing to look at it.
And we saw that state trend with MCAS data, with percentage of kids meeting, exceeding expectations, and the overall achievement score. When you're not in school, you can't learn. And it's the whole piece of it. Again, I'll touch on the SEL because it's so important. We have kids who come to school to eat. Being hungry is awful.
We are the safe place.
And you have a place where kids can come and have breakfast and have lunch and maybe even take home something with them if they need. Being hungry is awful. If you miss a couple days and you haven't had the opportunity to eat, that's awful. Being in a place that's warm, that has heat, that has electricity, that has a caring adult, that has someone who says hello to you, is a lot. There are a lot of kids who don't have that safe space at home, and that impacts you when you're in school. And when you're around that environment for 2, 3, 4 days because of a long weekend and an absenteeism, then you come to school, it takes a while to readjust and get used to that. And people think that doesn't have an impact on scores. They're wrong. And sometimes you have a kid who has that trauma over something that happens for the weekend, and they come back to school and they spend 2, 3 hours with Mr. Vega, an hour with Mr. Ringette, and then 2 hours with Lindsay Ryan, and an hour with Joe Carpenter, and then next thing you know, that's another date. But they needed that dialogue and that discussion to be able to enter into a safe space. So we know we have work to do on that chronic absenteeism, but just to celebrate, because I know Rob put a lot of things in place, we exceeded our targets in ELA math, met our targets in science, exceeded our targets in growth, had a little bit of growth in math. Those numbers there are astronomically high. We met 84% of our targets. That's, I'm going to say, uber high, or wicked high.
Wicked high.
Wicked high.
Right?
So we are very proud of that aspect of it, that we're, that obviously, the teachers were able to bring something out of the students during that time. They were able to promote a lot of things within their curriculum and get the students buy-in, essentially. Student buy-in is big.
Can I ask you on the data that you pulled up, was that district-wide or specific to the high school?
Specific to the high school.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to know. Keep
It is
in the
good to know.
back of my head.
Yep. So, obviously, opportunities, like I said, chronic absenteeism. The other one is, there's not when we're nitpicky. So our student growth in math wasn't quite 50%. It wasn't. So that is obviously an area for us to grow, but we did exceed our targets in those 3 major areas. All right. So grade 10 ELA highlights. Obviously, we scored higher than the state on 26 of the 34 standards that are tested. When you look at that, that's over 3/4 of the standards that our students were better than everybody else on average, which is phenomenal. That means our teachers are teaching the curriculum that's set forth by the state, that our students are able to kind of retain that information as they see the MCAS exam. So it was good. There was a lot of good here from the ELA department this year. They excelled at identifying using main ideas. We were greater than 10% on every question that kind of circled around referencing the main idea or finding the main idea from a passage or a paragraph or whatnot. So they were very good at that. and our students with disabilities, that subgroup definitely increased from 23% to 40% on the meeting and exceeding section of the MCAS. So that's
That
a
should be
huge
celebrated.
That's a huge jump. That's a
me,
huge
that's a
jump.
celebration, right?
So, oh yeah, and again, credit to our ELA staff that, that work hard with these kids and present it in however they present it to make those kids be able to reach.
Yep, I mean, and that's the
those
goal,
numbers.
right?
Yep. Exactly. It's getting them where they are and bringing them up. Yep. And bringing them where we can. Obviously, some opportunities, poetry interpretation.
Where's
Do you know how many
Miss
questions
Sosha?
there were on poetry?
I believe there were 6 or 7.
Trend throughout. I've noticed through all of
So,
them.
yeah, I'm just saying, like, so should we be like primary, Miss Sosha, roping her in to start doing like the poetry at the younger level, but primary, before it gets up to the elementary?
We can look at that. Miss Sosha would love to be here today, but she's celebrating a very big birthday.
Well, she can celebrate, but
But she
she has some homework to do.
I don't know that she'd appreciate that sentiment if you're talking about her birthday.
But we will,
The general consensus that we've gotten from, it starts, but it really starts in the primary school, right? And so,
Yeah,
if
even if
the
you
theme
read.
is poetry, if they're not exposed to it and they
Yep.
don't get it,
Yep,
then why aren't we putting it into the primary school?
Yeah.
I can go read some poetry to the kids.
There you go. As a
I've got
volunteer,
lots of it at home.
you know?
what we'll do is we'll have the conversation with the principals to see where it was with poetry that they're weak,
exposure.
and then expose it further, and then even just do the further dive to see where were we with it in 23, 22, 21, and 20. Sometimes what you'll see the state do is they'll do one question on one thing for like 7 years in a row, and that's why I asked the question.
Boom.
And then the
It's
next
gone.
year, you get 8 questions on one area, and they go back to one question all the way through. So we'll dive into that.
So I'll continue. On our argumentative essays, we have room to grow. We scored 12% below the state on that part. In a deeper dive, that showed that our main ideas were there, but our supporting arguments were not as good as they should have been, if you will. Okay, so there's room to grow. As with anything, there's room to grow because nobody has 100% accuracy on the MCAS. So we still have 60% of our students with disabilities that are partially meeting or not meeting the standards. We celebrate the fact that we're up to 40%, but we also are cognizant of the fact that we still have a ways to go in that area as well. But again, kudos to the ELA department for being able to get where they got. I can't express that piece enough.
There's goodness in this,
There's a lot of
right?
there's a lot of good things
And
going on
so-
there.
And I think that's to all the staff in all the schools, right? Absolutely. And as whether you're, the teacher, the aide, the custodian, like, it's everybody. It's the community within the school building. Anybody that comes in contact with our kiddos, it's that support. There's celebration to be had here.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we're giving ourselves opportunities of where we should be focusing in to try to get that more robust scores, or however you want to phrase it. But there's been growth here that should be celebrated.
And that 61% puts us in the top 20% of the state. So the kids, the work that the high school staff did, and again, this is science, this is social studies, this is everyone, but particular here with ELA, that 61% growth, like we saw it in the middle school, represents the top 20% in the state of growth. Those are high numbers. And again, we like to have the balance. We have stuff to celebrate, but we still have work to do. But that 61% shouldn't go unnoticed and unrecognized as a celebration of where our staff was able to take kids to and from, which puts us statistically in the top 20 of the state.
And I think they had the building blocks from primary, elementary, middle to high school. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't get to this.
Correct.
And so I think that we should celebrate, right? But obviously, there are opportunities still to be had, but This is a good score.
It is. It is. I agree. There's a lot to celebrate there. So we move on to math. With math, we had some good things happen. Just the fact that our average score increased by 4 points. So every year, the state comes out with a target as to what your average score should be. It's usually about a 2% growth on there, all right? And we basically doubled ours in math. So that is a place to celebrate. The fact that we were able to increase our mean score across the board by that much. Some of that came from the fact that I didn't put this up there, but our students that were exceeding last year, I think we had like 1%. This year, up to 7%. So we made some strides in some areas. Again, the numbers are very similar to last year's, though, granted, between the meeting and exceeding and those that are not. So it's 47 to 53 split, where the 53 is below the meeting expectations piece, all right? So where do we have room to grow? Where have we made some successes? So in our successes, the high need students, we've been able to close that gap. It was 15 points last year. So when I say 15 points, I don't mean like percentage points, I mean like MCAS points. So if the MCAS score was a 502, it was 15 points on the MCAS scale that we were able to close the gap from 15 down to 10. So we're still looking to close that gap still, but we're in the right direction of moving that needle. So that's always a plus. And then on geometric theorems and interpreting linear and exponential models, over 90% of our students showed proficiency in those areas. So I find that to be something to really celebrate, because you need the logic base in order to work on theorems. And then anytime students are modeling in mathematics, I'm a happy person, because that's what brings you across multiple disciplines, is the ability to model in mathematics in something that's maybe not directly mathematical, like how many seashells did Susie sell? Opportunities, there was a pretty good size gap on function notation across the board. Function notation is a part of mathematics where if you're not exposed to it enough, it can be tricky. It's a lot of input and output type of situations, and it just looks very advanced for a ninth grader. That's typically when it gets introduced, is during Algebra 1. So it's sometimes it can look very complex to a freshman in high school. And if it's not regularly used in class, then that type of exposure can, go away. And I believe that is what happened here, is that the exposure to it was, when it came along in the curriculum, it was exposed, but as the year progressed, it wasn't regularly addressed. That is some of the feedback I actually received from the teachers. So I'm fairly confident that is actually the reason why function notation was one of our issues on this exam. Multi-step problems. Answer the first piece, doesn't carry through to the other pieces. We're kind of beating the drum a little bit here. So I think that's been said a few times already tonight. And then 38% of the points were earned on expressing geometric properties with equations. That's more of a situation of, if you have a circle, you have the equation of a circle, can you identify center, radius, things like that. So being able to interpret from a numerical model. Okay. Science technology. So here, you're going to see an SGP that's not available. at the time, not applicable. Couple of reasons for that is because when you're talking about STE, there's a couple of different exams that are offered. So by comparison, if we had changed to the physics model then versus the biology model, you can't compare the apples and oranges. We've stayed with the biology model at this point, but still they kind of keep that open for the high school science department. Our average scores increased. It essentially reached our target, which was nice. We decreased our not meeting expectations by 5%. So we only have, we're actually down to 2% this past year of students not meeting expectations, which is really good. And our meeting exceeding did increase by a couple of points. We weren't flat in any way, shape, or form. But again, here there's little room for growth. One of the two of the key components of this, and these are the glaring ones. I'm going to go reverse order. So out of the 16 questions related to standard LS1, which is really covers things from molecules to organisms, which is your life science piece. And I think we saw that in an earlier piece with one of the other schools that maybe, in their science, they weren't focused, there may have been focus on life sciences as well. But we scored lower than the state on 10 of those 16 problems that were there. So that's an eye-glaring area of focus. Following that is translating models in biology. And that actually kind of goes into that life cycle standard. Inside that life cycle standard, even though we scored lower than the state on 10 of the 16 problems, it's those problems that we were exceptionally lower than the state on. So ultimately though, when they force us to kind of really look into what's going on, that's a good thing to have, versus having a situation where you're like, well, let's try to find the things that went right. We had a lot of right go on, which is nice. We have some room to grow in areas, obviously, but I'm very proud of what the school as a whole was able to accomplish last year, and looking to accomplish more, hopefully. So, graphically, if you take a peek at the graphs, again, we're kind of like the more solid line in green. The state's the more dotted line in gray. And our, ELA, we're kind of pushing it back against the state a little bit. Mathematically, you'll see that we do have an upward trend now that's very much in line with the state as far as directionally. And then here's our science trend, which is, again, moving in the positive direction. And depending on what the state does, when their data is all compiled, I think we'll look pretty favorably in that as well. Any questions?
How does Douglas fare? This is my first year I've gotten to review MCAS data. How do we fare as far as passing to graduate in the 10th? Is that an issue for Douglas schools?
So when we get the results and we identify those who have not reached competency determination, which the state sets, we identify those students. There's a few things that kind of go into place on that. It depends kind of on the student and what their needs are and what we can do to support them. So in some cases, the student may have missed by 1 point or maybe 2 points. So, we give them the retake. The retake happens the following November-ish, following February, that time frame. They go through their, let's say, I'll call it math, let's say. Let's say student is not meeting expectations, didn't reach competency on math. They're in their next math class. they're gaining math skills that they might not have previously had. They're still getting that exposure. There is a very strong likelihood that they will actually be successful the next time they take it as a junior in November, okay? However, there are situations where maybe that doesn't occur and we need to integrate better intervention, okay? So we have a few things on the docket at the high school where we push students into a study skills class, or perhaps we might use a teacher's assistant role in a geometry class if they're in an upper level class, but maybe their geometry knowledge isn't quite there, because in all honesty, your upper level classes focus more on stronger algebraic skills versus geometric skills. Similarly, if a student got not meeting or a zero competency in biology, well, if they pass that biology class, their next class isn't biology 2, it's chemistry or another science. So what do we do in order to increase that biology knowledge? Well, we do like the TA model to have them assist the teachers in those biology classes or in those previous classes so they can actually gain that knowledge again or retain that knowledge better, have greater access to that knowledge on a very regular basis. And they work with the teacher, usually exclusively, to kind of gain a bit of that. So that's one of our stronger interventions in a situation like that. We might have one or two students every year that might not quite meet that competency determination on the standard MCAS. We do look at other options as well, such as portfolio submissions or, in some severe cases, the MCAS alt submission. So there are layers to it. And Mrs. O'Brien, who kind of runs our MCAS world in our guidance department, she kind of takes the bull by the horns on that one and kind of steers us and tells me, all right, on this student, I think we should look at this scenario. And this student, I think we should look at this scenario. We really should kind of, if there's a portfolio submission, then we have certain things we have to do. So there are levels of it depending on student level of success, student needs, and a few other details, but yeah. So we do have things
Yeah, it's nice
rolling.
that you have stuff in place and ready to support those students.
Because I would hate to, it bothers me to sit there and have the potential to sit there and tell a student, I'm sorry, I can only hand you a certificate of attendance
Yeah.
and not a high school diploma.
Yeah. 100%.
So that part, just because you did not pass this part of the MCAS exam. That's not a plug in any way, shape, or form. That's just a personal feeling of when I'm on stage at graduation day and I'm handing out diplomas, I like knowing that I'm handing every kid a Douglas High School diploma because they were successful in every possible way. So.
Anybody else? No, I just appreciate everybody taking the time to dig in, because like numbers, there's always a story behind the numbers, right? And, there are opportunities. I like how we're phrasing it as an opportunity for our future growth between all of the schools. And then what are we doing to move the district forward? It's not as bleak as, as it was a couple of years ago. We're making strides. Are there areas that we can still improve? Yes.
100%.
I'd like to, hear Dr. Vera's thoughts, where we're going to go and with a follow-up, because MCAS data is just one thing. I think once we put the ISSPs in place too as well, with the STAR data, the metrics that we're using, and, STEM is now in our schools, that's a good thing. We have the social, the adjustment counselors there too as well. I mean, it's everything we've been doing and building upon the last couple of years is now coming to fruition. And this is just one little data point.
Yeah.
If it was easy, everyone would be at 100% of kids meeting or exceeding expectations. And there isn't a school in the Commonwealth that is doing that year after year after year. It's a lot of work, and you said it. This is complex. You have MCAS. You saw some of the data dives that they did, looking at, in one place it was low income, in another place it was what they did for high needs. In one instance, it was poetry. In another instance, it was something else. You could spend hours diving into the MCAS. And if teachers are teaching the standards, they're hitting everything they should be hitting for the MCAS. But it's one data point in who we are. I went to the soccer game today, and we heard the kids talking about cross-country. I had to stop to get into the high school. You saw the kids running cross-country. Bob was out there doing cross-country. We have 2 cross-country coaches. We had Kathy out there helping out, who's our retired Miss Hayes, who came back to help. You had a school community out there cheering on the kids. We had a soccer game where we had probably about 100 fans out there watching. That's all part of what we do and getting kids back involved. It's been great going to the volleyball games, and you see different number of kids in the stands. We have a lot to celebrate, and I want to be mindful and cognizant to celebrate the hard work that everyone has done. We've talked about it, from bus drivers to cafeteria workers to our paras to our support staff at the office to our teachers. Everyone has done a lot of work to get kids to this point. But we also have to be mindful. We have to grow, and we need to look at where we were weak and progress on it. I'll speak to the middle school. Middle school scores have always been great, but Bob has also been here for 4 years. So having that longevity and that institutional knowledge in a building to kind of know where to push, where not to push, where to move things is important. We all have our careers outside of what we do on the school committee, and we know the importance of experience and the importance of longevity in doing something, and that's where you see that growth. Rob, when he started here, quickly identified an area in ELA and an area in math. That happened in July, and he made a couple of switches, some of them popular, some of them not, 3 weeks onto the job. But we saw what those switches did in terms of scores in ELA. Ken started halfway through the school year. I think his first day, was it after Veterans Day or after Columbus? It was after Veterans Day.
Yeah, but that week.
It was that week of Veterans Day, so it'll almost be a year. So he already inherited things, and he's trying to piece things together. But again, we know where our pitfalls are. We knew that grade 5 and 7 were weak, and we identified those areas of weakness, and we're looking to put things in place. We saw that 4th grade, we had the dip, and again, Ken spoke to that dip in the 4th grade. But I'm happy where we're going, but we still have a lot of work to do. But thank you to everyone for doing it, and again, kudos to the principals for, when I asked them to analyze the stuff and talk about strengths and opportunities, not just to say we need to do better on this one type of question. They really dove into it. And some of those lists could have gone a lot longer, but we just wanted to give people an overview of, these are some of the highlights and some of the work that they're doing with their staff in common planning time to move kids.
Anybody else? All right,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on to the school committee and subcommittee report, the accounts payable report.
The moment we've all been waiting for.
I know.
Let's see here. I had the privilege of signing the warrant 12 SCH 25 with the date of September 20th, 2024. There are 5 batch numbers for a grand total of $105,645.50. Everything looked great. And then the next one that I signed was warrant 14 SCH 25 with a date of October 4th, 2024. There were 4 batches for a grand total of $75,568.83. Also, there were no discrepancies or anything out of the ordinary or concerning. And then there was warrant 13 SCH 25 with a date of September 20th, 2024. There were 10 batches for a grand total of $159,436.77. That also looked great. That's all I got.
Thanks so much. Moving on to our consent agenda, the October 2nd meeting minutes. If nobody has any issues, I'd be looking for a motion.
I move to approve the school committee meeting minutes from October 2nd, 2024.
Meg makes the motion, seconded by
Teresa.
Second by Teresa. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? We're good to go on that one. Next is the vote to close school choice for the 2024-2025 school year.
So every year in April-ish, we vote to open school choice, and every year in October, we vote to close school choice. We're at that time of the year where we're looking to close school choice. The school committee set forth a bunch of numbers as to where we were going to close grades, we were going to keep grades open, and you get to the point where you get too far down the school year, if you leave school choice open, it can be problematic. So that's usually why we try to close it in that first or second meeting in October. So in probably another week or two, I'll be bringing some enrollment numbers for you. Lauren's still waiting for our private school numbers and for our school choice out numbers from local schools, so the report's not complete. She's still waiting for that stuff to come in, but we're at the point where we should be closing school choice.
Anybody have any questions? Are they looking for a motion?
I'll make that motion to close school choice for the 2024-2025 school year.
Motion made by Julia, seconded by?
Meg.
Second by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Good to go. Next is the disposal of the district-wide electronic waste of no value.
Dominic has been at a training the last several days, so I will take this for him. The district does have a large amount of old end-of-life IT equipment, such as our CRT monitors, old projectors, printers, desktops, that are no longer usable, and they've been there for quite some time. They're taking up space in room B, 112 at the high school, and this room needs to be emptied so that it can be used as a computer lab. But
Exciting, hopefully.
good computers, yeah, they work. Good equipment that works. There is no cost associated with recycling this equipment. The district will be using what's called Upcycle USA. I did provide some information on that, and Dominic has used this in prior districts as well. So they take care of everything. There is no cost to it. And he did provide a listing of the equipment as well.
Anybody have any questions?
Is there anything we need to worry about on all of these computers as far as wiping the
Yeah, they take
data?
care of the data. I asked them that too. Yeah, they do.
Hard
They,
drives get pulled, they get drilled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No possible.
There's nothing on there?
yeah.
Got it, okay.
No state secrets.
I mean, I just want, we have, like, if students have, I don't want student names and, you know.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Good question.
Any other questions? Be looking for a motion?
I move to approve the disposal of e-waste IT equipment per the attached listing that is no longer usable. The equipment will be recycled at no cost to the district.
Motion made by Teresa, seconded by?
Meg.
Second by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Awesome, we get rid of some really old
Have a computer
equipment.
lab,
And we
another room.
open up class space.
Open up a room.
Repurpose some stuff. Good. The FY 2025 grant expenditure approvals, Title I, Title 2A, and Title IV, the IDEA Part B, IDEA Part C.
Okay, pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 7153A, we do need to bring these to the school committee to accept, and we do have some forms that need to be signed later on as well. We're bringing before you 5 federal grants, FY25 Title I grant in the amount of $117,583. The purpose of expenditure is Title I services for Title I students, and that's at the primary and elementary schools only. We have the FY25 Title IIA grant, $19,468. The purpose of expenditure is supporting effective instruction. A lot of this is, PD, professional development. The FY25 Title IV Part A grant, $10,000. Purpose of expenditure, student support and academic enrichment. Same thing. FY25 IDEA Part B grant, $311,829. Purpose of expenditure is special education expenditures, tuitions, contractual services, and other. Most of it is for special ed tuitions. the FY25 IDEA Part C grant, $11,462. Purpose of expenditure is special education expenditures, and we use this for because it can only be for early childhood, that's our early childhood grant, for the preschool program, and basically it offsets part of one ABA salary. So does anyone have any questions?
So who applies for these grants every year?
Okay, the first three is Cindy Sosha, the primary school principal, and the last two is Mr. Rosenthal, the director of special education and student support services.
But the state, I can't speak to the IDEA, Courtney, maybe you can, but for the first three, the state tells you what the dollar amount is.
Oh, for all of them.
Oh, for all, so the
All
state
of
tells you
them.
what
Oh,
the
yeah.
dollar amount
All
is,
of
and then
them.
you have to submit
Right.
where you're going to spend the money.
Right.
Cindy does the first three, and Greg does
Yeah.
the last two.
And they're a very, as I'm sure you know with federal grants, yeah, they're very highly stipulated, exactly what, you need to do with the funds, with very little leeway, with a lot of caveats that have to be met as well.
Yeah.
So the total for all five, I did forget to mention this, the total of the 5 federal grants is $470,342. So basically, it supports federal public school initiatives that support students and staff in the school district.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just, any dollar that we can save,
Absolutely.
grants are the way to go, so.
Yay, grants.
So,
Do all of our schools apply? That was only special
Oh, no.
ed and primary.
Oh, no, these are for the entire district. All of these, well, let me back up. Title I, as I stated, that's only because Title I schools can only be spent on Title I schools, and that's our primary school and elementary school. The Title IV, the IDEA, both of those, the IDEA Part B grant, $311,829, that's for the entire district. That pays, most of that pays for special ed tuitions district-wide, so it offsets our operating budget. And the IDEA Part C, that is only to support early childhood education, so you can only spend it on early childhood education. And as I said, we do use that for the preschool program to offset part of the salary for an ABA in the classroom.
The Title IIA money, the bulk of that goes to our mentoring program for new teachers in the district, years 1, 2, and 3, to pay for the stipends for those positions. And Title IV is for professional development.
Yeah, lots of PD.
And there's 4 categories.
District-wide.
Yeah.
And then both of those are district-wide, too.
Okay.
So there's some pretty strict regulations as to
Yeah.
where you can spend the money on.
I could jump in. I've always been in awe of the people that apply for the grants because it's such an underrated, underappreciated job, I think, from the point of view of the public. Most people don't know about them. But just looking at these, 5 grants isn't a whole lot, though it's a ton of work for each one.
It's a lot of
Each
work.
with different standards, but that's $500,000, just shy. And I hear pretty regularly, but we hear this, I think, in any line of work, people are always quick to say, oh, they make so much money. And it's like 2 individuals took the time and the dedication and the effort to fill out these grants and then received the grant money, assuming we accept it, and obviously paying their salaries, obviously helping keep the schools running and helping the students learn. I just think that if there's anybody out there in the YouTube universe watching this, please take note that people here are going above and beyond, filling out these grants. So, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And we won't even talk about the amendments that happen to the grant, because when you write the grant in, for instance, in July, you might say, I'm going to allocate $5,000 to this professional development that happens in February, and the PD goes from it never goes down, but we're going to be positive, it goes from $5,000 to $4,000. Now you have to write an amendment for what you're going to do for that additional $1,000. So the work happens not only from the grant department, the people writing the grants, but then for Courtney and Ellen, who have to track
Of course.
all of
Always
it
the
as well, too.
reporting,
It's a lot of
in the
work.
new program they have, that the state implemented. They should have left well enough alone. The new GEMS program is no gem. And let me tell you, they should never have named it GEMS. It is, I'll tell you, Cindy's been doing this for many, many, many years, and I've never heard a peep out of her until they went to the GEMS program, but they have to keep resubmitting. It is a nightmare. And there's a lot of reporting and monitoring and compliance and everything with them. They really are, particularly the federal grants.
For sure, it's
Yeah.
a ton of work, but it's,
Yeah.
I know that I think speak for all of us when we say we really appreciate it, and probably the whole dang town, because $500,000 is still a lot of money.
$500,000.
And especially if our insurance went up, so, thank you. Yep.
Any other questions? If not, no other questions, I'd be looking for a motion.
Well, since I just made that grand speech, I will move to approve the following fiscal year 2025 federal grants that have been applied for and the expenditure of funds as approved by DESI and/or amended and approved by DESI. Fiscal year 2025 Title I grant, fiscal year 2025 Title IIA grant, and fiscal year 2025 Title IV Part A grant, fiscal year 2025 IDEA Part B grant, and fiscal year 2025 IDEA Part C grant.
Motion made by Julia, seconded by? Meg. Seconded by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Thank you so much. That concludes the consent agenda, and now moving over to the school business and operations manager's report, please.
Well, if I didn't have that large end-of-the-year report, I was hoping to have some transfers, but they're just going to have to wait. But I'm hoping to push the button, submit it tomorrow. Not push the button,
Awesome.
but upload it, so thank goodness. So the next thing on the agenda is, we just, I remember we talked several meetings back about bringing more information to you throughout the year on school district capital needs. I know I sent you a lot of information. I do not intend to go through all of that stuff, okay? Some of it's just for, I wanted to say that right up front. Okay, but just a little bit of background, especially for some of you who may be new. So we have a capital improvement committee in town. Yep. Called the CIC. And they, work on coming up with a listing for over 5 years of all town departments in needs throughout the town. If they have a substantial life in excess of 4 years and the total estimated cost exceeds 10,000 years. So just to give you that little background.
$10,000, not 10,000 years.
$10,000, yep. So I'm trying to go fast here. Yeah. Well, okay. So we do provide a list annually and go to the meetings. So I did want to bring to you just what I did submit to them. And again, we'll do more as meetings go, because throughout this school year, at least until the end of this year, I'll be bringing more and more information. I want to make sure that the school committee is really up to date on the facilities, the buildings, and all of that. But there's a lot to it, as you know, what I provided to you. So I did provide you what we did submit on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024, and I did do a couple of updates. So what I want to bring to your attention here is, these are just some of the things at the very top there. These are things that have been on, it shows in the left-hand side how long they've been on there. We have to reprioritize each year because things do change. If you, all of a sudden, now you've got a big building issue that, so your priorities are going to change each year. Projects will change, priorities will change. That happens anywhere. You'll see the biggest thing on there is the primary roof, and that's for the main section of the building, gym and auditorium. And I'm waiting for an estimate on that. That is italicized, so I really don't have any idea. So we did get from Maya, the town's insurance company, they actually did a report on all of the school district's roofs. They submitted it to us. So we do have problems with all 4 of our buildings, but obviously the primary school is the worst one and the oldest one. We did do part of the roof, 2017, but this is the next section of the roof that needs to be done. I did pay to have an infrared screening done of the primary roof. I just got a notification, actually, I just got a text stating that, thank goodness, it doesn't look like as much damage as they maybe originally thought, but they do have to do a little bit of cuts to check on the insulation. The insulation is wet then that means it's just going to be more costly. So we are waiting for that. That's the largest thing we have on here. As you can see, most of the other things on here, we've had on here for a number of years. Down below, you will see that we have removed some things from the list, because they've just been on there for a number of years. And actually, that shouldn't say 2026. That's not what that means there for the fiscal year requested, because the Bunsen burners were on there for a number of years. We did do that. We did take care of that this year, and we funded that, so that's coming off the list. We are looking to utilize school choice to fund a few of these projects here, because they are very small. They just keep getting pushed to the very end of the 5 years. And there are some things, for instance, the projector, that has been on for many, many, many years, and it's used for the town meeting. It's also used for instruction or classes or things that happen in the auditorium at the high school. It's just gonna go. So then I'll end up having to find the money anyway, so I'd rather be proactive, and before it dies, like the night before a town meeting, we get the projector. So we wanted to take care of that. The school lunch program ones we're taking off because we have such a good balance left in the school lunch program, and you're not even allowed to hang on to a lot of money. They will actually get written up. So all those we took off as well. We'll be funding those through the school lunch program, along with, just to let you know, we are going to do an upgrade. We need to get new POS computers, because in the middle school, they've been actually keep crashing and dying, which is very bad when you're trying to, run a school lunch program. We're also going to be upgrading from NutriKids to Mosaic, which most school districts have. We just didn't have the funding before, but with the way things are going, I hate to say COVID, but unfortunately, I hate to say even positive, but at least we've got some funds to be able to take care of that. So they'll be in very good stead at the school lunch program. So our main concerns are just the buildings themselves. And we did go last year before the Board of Selectmen. We did ask years ago for a survey to be done just for primary school, and that just got no traction at all. We also had, for years, we had $600,000 on the plan to do the major components of the primary school, because it's 45 years old. So we need to take care of the primary school, but that didn't go anywhere. So then last year, we went and requested a survey of all the buildings. Said maybe even the town departments might want to do that, because that is what you typically do. But the first meeting we went to, we actually had a majority of the Board of Selectmen that were in favor of it, definitely in favor of it. And the next meeting we went to, none of them were in favor of it. But luckily, I happened to look on MSBA, and I did send this to you. They actually sent out an RFP to do building surveys of certain school buildings throughout the state, and our schools are on this listing. So just to let you know, today, Paul had sent me a MASS email. They're having on November 1st, MSBA is having an update on all of that. So after November 1st, I can let you know when they're doing it. I want to find out more about the process, what that's going to mean after they get that survey, because obviously it all depends on funding, like everything else. But thank goodness for that. We will have a survey done. I think that is excellent news.
And that's of all the buildings?
Yes, I believe so, if I remember correctly. It was a while ago that I looked at it. I'm 99% sure it was all 4 buildings. There's so many pages here. There's hundreds and hundreds of them here. So, let's see. I can hardly read with such tiny print. Let's see, primary, middle, high, and elementary. Yes. Yeah, which will be fantastic. So I did tell you about the Meyer report regarding our roofs, and we do have it in writing that we had somebody that has knowledge, requisite skill set and knowledge to do that. I'm saying that absolutely our roofs need to be looked at, something needs to be done, but the primary school is the priority. I have the infrared scan done. They're going to do a little bit more work. I will be getting a roof report, and they're also going to provide an estimate. I'm hoping that should come in the next week or so that I can bring that to the capital improvement committee at the end of the month when we go. Because that's why I jumped right on getting the screening done and so we can get an estimate done. And I'm very glad to hear it's not as bad as they originally thought it would be. Because we've had a lot of, as you know, a lot of torrential rainstorms and all kinds of things. So So just a little just reminder that, just one more thing, I don't want to take any more time, but in addition to the buildings things, we also do have a truck, tractors, other equipment as well, but we have been trying to take care of those on our own as well through either Rural Aid Grant or School Choice. We've been doing, fairly well, making some traction there. But I do want to remind everyone that we have, and I did provide some data to you, we have just the HVAC components on our roofs. There's 461 different components on our roofs. That's a lot to maintain, okay? A lot to maintain, and things do go wrong. Want to let everyone know before I close, very important, that our school buildings are inspected by the fire chief and the building inspector every single summer. We always get a list. There are usually very little things. We take care of them before school starts. We also perform maintenance. We have maintenance contracts on a number of our components. The biggest one is our HVAC system. We do preventative maintenance. They come in and go through all of our buildings. There's a lot of work that happens over the summertime on preventative maintenance. So within our operating budget, we have the maintenance contracts that we have with a number of different companies to maintain our buildings. We also have hundreds of thousands of dollars, for repairs as well that we budget, between the preventative maintenance and the repairs, to keep up our buildings, the operating aspect of it. But then it does come to a point in time when you do have to, it becomes a capital item and it needs to be addressed. So we'll be providing more information as we go along and, going forward. I do want to apologize. We have been remiss, in prior years, we kind of just brought it. The superintendent and I brought it to the, capital, but we want to make sure that the school committee is fully aware of what's going on with our buildings, what's going on with the process, going forward. So I'm happy about that. And also, we do need to remember what we talked about before about the insurance aspect too, that we talked about, the deductible. That's also another component, and that's all related to as well. So,
We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on routine maintenance and on repairs. Stuff happens. If you think of your house, your routine maintenance. We all have to replace our air filters in our air conditioning units. We all have to clean out the lint in our dryer, right? Those are all part of routine maintenance. We have repairs that we do. Stuff happens over the course of a school year. You do it at your home. Lights go out, you need to fix the light bulb, you plug something into an outlet, it worked for 20 years, now it doesn't. But then you have those big massive things, a new roof, a new furnace, vinyl siding on your house, new windows, and that's what these capital projects are. If you just think of that middle school, and I'm going to use that because I see it every day, we have a little over 300 students. Every day there are 300 pairs of feet that go into that cafeteria. And staff, so let's call it 350. 350 pairs of feet that go into that cafeteria for breakfast and then go back out. 350 that go back in for lunch and then go back out. Probably another 100 who, while they're in the cafeteria, go back out to go to the bathroom and go back in. Just the foot traffic in that 15 by 6 area is massive. It's a lot of foot traffic.
Toilets are flushed, and never mind what's getting flushed down them. Okay, that's another story. But, doors getting pushed open. I mean, it just,
There's a lot of maintenance.
schools take a lot of, that no other buildings really do have anything like that's comparable. So, but we're doing pretty well, and, look forward to moving forward and doing some capital planning for hopefully 5, 10, 20 years, for all the buildings, actually, not just the schools, all the buildings, and see if we can come up with some financial planning to begin to address them. I mean, there were a number of years they really couldn't. But now things are looking at getting to be in a better financial picture, so I'm thinking probably going forward, that'll take place as well, so that's all positive, so.
Did we get any kind of update on the insurance? Remember we asked?
We did, yeah. So I received something from the town. We had a bunch of claims. Some of it workers' comp claims, some of it were building claims, some of it were losses at the school side and the municipal side as a result of the sheer volume of those claims that went in. Our insurance went up. Probably the easiest way to think about it is you get into a car accident, your insurance goes up. We had a couple of, in simple terms, we had a couple of car accidents, whether it's losses in buildings, whether it was police, fire, the municipal, the middle school, the high school, workers' comp claims, that drove our insurance up.
Anything else? Any other topics not anticipated? We are going to go into executive session. And the reason we're going into executive session is to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, and if an open meeting may be detrimental to the effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares, and I'm declaring. We will not come back out of our executive session. We will adjourn from that, but I need to have a motion for us to go into, to adjourn, to go into executive session.
I will make that motion to go into executive session.
Motion made by Julia, seconded by?
Teresa?
Seconded by Teresa. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have to.
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote, please.
Teresa Brooks, aye.
Meg Rods and I.
Julia Lagerholm, aye.
Heather Moore and I, and we're going into executive session at 8:54 PM on September